I want to talk to you about two subjects today very briefly. I'm wearing two hats, which I'm going to wear for the next 10 months. One hat is as a candidate for the United States Senate. The second hat that I'm going to be wearing is my state treasurer's hat. Let me talk about the United States Senate race first, and then I'll talk about wearing my treasurer's hat, some of the problems that we're facing in our state. I'll be a candidate and am a candidate for the United States Senate this year. The reason is very simple. I want my country back. I'm afraid we're losing it. My mom and dad were just small, middle-class Americans. My dad was a small businessman. He owned a little lumber yard. My mom was a retired school teacher. But they taught us conservative values. Things like God, church, family, country, discipline, hard work, education. And I'm afraid we're losing those values in America today. I look around, I don't know about you, but I look around and here's what I see in America today. I see too many undeserving, I want to emphasize undeserving, too many undeserving people at the top getting special treatment and bailouts. And I see too many undeserving people at the bottom getting handouts. And I see the average American taxpayer who just gets up every day and goes to work getting the bill. And we can't pay it anymore. You know why? Because our health insurance has gone up because of Obamacare. Because our taxes have gone up. Because our tuition has gone up. But I'll tell you what hadn't gone up. Our income. My child's generation, my son's generation, he's 20. He is a member of the first generation in America that is at risk of being worse off than his parents. We're losing the American dream. And the reason is that it is harder than ever to get ahead, and it's easier than ever to do nothing. And I lay the blame for that at the feet of the President of the United States, President Obama, his tag team partner, Secretary Clinton, but also the big government Republicans and the Ritz-Carlton Democrats in the United States Congress. We deserve better, my state deserves better, and my country deserves better, and that's why I want to go to Washington, D.C. Let me tell you what I want, briefly, for my state and my country. I want a Louisiana and America where every single person can get a decent job. Let me tell you something. If we keep losing bright young people in Louisiana to Denver and to Dallas and to Atlanta, if we keep losing those young people, the average age in our state is going to be deceased. Now, you can't be for jobs if you're against business. To grow jobs, business women and businessmen need low taxes. They need reasonable regulation, they need good infrastructure, and they need a skilled workforce, and that's what I'm going to work hard for every day in the United States Senate. I want a country and a state that respects taxpayer dollars. Now, I am sick of the waste, and I am sick of the spending, and you should be too. We have a $19 trillion national debt. You know what that means? That means that our United States Congress has spent $19 trillion more than they took in and then borrowed the money to fill the hole. And you know who's going to get to pay it back? Our kids and our grandkids. Let me talk about three other subjects quickly. Number one, health care. I don't know how else to say this. Obamacare sucks, okay? The president told us that if we would pass the Affordable Care Act, that health insurance would be cheaper and more accessible, and it would make our lives better. It's done neither, and it's made our lives worse. I want mothers and dads to be able to take their sick children to family doctors instead of emergency rooms because they have affordable health insurance from the private sector, not from government. And I'm going to work hard for that every day in the United States Senate. Finally, I want, well, two more points, and then I'm going to talk about our state finances. I want a country and a state that understands that free market capitalism has done more to lift people out of poverty than all of the social programs government has put together. And let me be blunt. The American people are the most compassionate people in the world. If you are hungry, we will feed you. If you're homeless, we'll house you. If you're too poor to be sick, we'll pay for your doctor. But it's expensive. And welfare was supposed to be a bridge, not a parking lot. And it's becoming a parking lot, and we need to do something about that in the United States Congress, and I'm going to work hard to change it every single day. And the final point I'll make, I want a country and a state that values and respects life. And it doesn't matter whether that life is 82 years old or 82 seconds old. It is life, and we should protect it. Now let me switch hats for a second and talk about the situation we find ourselves in today. I did a TV program early this morning, and they said, why are we having financial problems? I said, it's real simple. For the past 8 years, the legislature, at the suggestion of the prior administration, every year has spent more money than it took in. That's just a fact. And they papered over it by raiding every single savings account that we have and using accounting gimmicks. Now, you can blame that on governors all you want to, but under our Constitution, as Woody knows because he helped draft it, it's the legislature that passes the budget. So when they pretend to be so shocked, they were there. That's why we're running a budget deficit. We ran out of savings accounts to raid. In 2005, the state budget was $16.5 billion. Today it's $25 billion. We've grown our budget 42% over 10 years when the Louisiana economy, measured by gross domestic product, has only increased 25%. Government has grown. It's been my experience with the bureaucracy that its appetite is insatiable. Ronald Reagan was a wise man, never wiser than when he said the only way to achieve eternal life on this earth is to become a government program. He was absolutely right. So what do we do about it? Governor Edwards, and I say this with all the respect I can muster because I want Governor Edwards to do well. If he does well, Louisiana does well. But here's Governor Edwards' request of Louisiana. He wants Louisiana businesses and Louisiana families to cut their budgets so state government doesn't have to cut its budget. And that's not right. He believes we are one tax increase away from prosperity. He is proposing the largest tax increase in the history of the state. I've met with him. He's deadly serious. He is proposing to raise personal income taxes, sales taxes, corporate income taxes, corporate franchise taxes, business utility taxes, inventory taxes. He wants a new internet tax, cigarette taxes, liquor taxes. He wants to start taxing services, and I'm sure I'm leaving some out. It won't work. Number one, it'll wreck this economy. Number two, I don't care how high you raise revenue. As long as you keep spending more than you take in, you're going to run deficits. Here's what I've asked him to do. And I've asked him to say to the people of Louisiana, look, we're not going to talk about taxes anymore. We're not going to talk about the tax code. For the next 6 months, we're going to ask ourselves one question and one question only. How do we lower our costs while still being able to deliver a decent product. I've sent Governor Edwards over 400 different suggestions. I've copied the legislature, 400 different suggestions about how we can reduce our spending without hurting anyone. I sent him, for example, here are about 300 of them right here. This is from the Louisiana Streamlining Government Commission that we spent a year on. I also sent him a copy of the Secure report done by the business community in 1995, and I sent him a copy of the Cut the Fat report authored in part by then Senator Darden in 2001. And I sent him some of my own ideas. And I've copied every member of the legislature. I'm going to mention, if it's okay, briefly about 5 of them. Number 1, I've sent them all a list of 156 special funds into which money automatically flows. We call them statutory dedications. They're not dedicated in the Constitution. They're dedicated by statute. They were dedicated with the majority vote of the legislature. They can undedicate them with the majority vote of the legislature. I've recommended that we undedicate all 156 of them, let that money go into the general fund, and the recipients, the former recipients of the money, now have to compete with higher education and health care and roads and prove their worth. Because I don't think we ought to be funding the Sunflower Festival, that's one of them, the Poke Salad Festival, or the Redbud Festival when the governor's threatened to shut down LSU. That will free up about I checked this morning the balance, about $389 million. Now, the governor and his financial advisors say it won't work. Well, I've got here, if you want to see it, a newspaper article from October when Governor Edwards and Commissioner Darden were both running for governor, and they were asked the question, what's the first thing you'll do? And they said, we're going to eliminate the statutory dedications. So I don't know what's happened in 3 months to make it a bad idea, but it'll work. Number 2, we have 19,000 consulting contracts. We don't need all of them. I got a report last week from the Division of Administration. They put out an annual report, it's never publicized, of how many consultants they hired in the previous year. I've got it right here if you want to see it. They hired, I won't show it to you, but they hired 4,017 new consultants last year. Now the amount of the money, I'll show you the report, $14.5 billion. It's on page 4, paragraph 3 of the report. Now that money's going to be spent over several years. Let me give you some examples. We're supposed to be broke, right? A few months ago, they hired a consultant here in Baton Rouge for $11.6 million. Her job is to develop a marketing and communications plan for the Louisiana Department of Economic Development. We hired for, I think, $12 million a consultant from out of state. Their job, it's a company, is to develop a website for our food stamp recipients at the Department of Children and Family Services. Now let me tell you something. Our neighbors on food stamps don't need a website. They need help getting a job. We're supposed to be broke now. A few months ago, they hired 2 different artists. They're paying them together $1.1 million to create a sculpture for one of our public hospitals. Now, how are we doing this if we're broke? Why would we do this when we're looking Louisiana taxpayers in the eye and saying, we need more of your money? Number 3, 22%, according to the legislative auditor, of all of our managers in the classified service of state government manage 1 employee. You couldn't manage your business that way. The average manager in Louisiana state government manages 4 employees. We ought to do what Secure recommended in 1995 and reorganize and go to a span of control of 1 boss for 8 employees. Number 4, last year, these are not my numbers, they're PAR's numbers, We had 900,000 visits to emergency rooms paid for by taxpayers for non-emergencies. Let me be more specific. While we're visiting today, folks on Medicaid are taking an ambulance ride to go to an emergency room to get treated for acne, to get a pregnancy test, to have a wart removed, to see if they need glasses, to talk to somebody about losing weight. Now that's legal, and we will pay for those services under Medicaid, but neither state nor federal law requires us to deliver those services in an emergency room where it costs 5 times more to do it. All we got to do is go over to Houston, to Houston's Memorial Hermann Hospital, and copy their patient navigator program, where they put a paraprofessional at the entrance of every ER. When somebody comes in and says, hey, my acne's bad, they're told, look, we're going to get you an appointment with a doctor, but not here in the ER. Not here. If we could cut those 900,000 taxpayer-funded visits by 10%, we'd save tens, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars. Last one. Our Medicaid program is supervised by a federal agency called the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, called CMS. CMS has estimated that 10% of the money we spend on Medicaid is attributable to fraud. Now, we are spending $9 billion a year on Medicaid, soon to be about $11 billion, and that's including the overhead at DHH. 10% of $9 billion is $900 million, folks. Even if CMS is half wrong, that's $450 million. And you know what we're doing about it? Not a dead-gum thing. We need to ask Darryl Pepera, the legislative auditor, to embed about 15 legislative auditors over at DHH, and we need to root out this fraud and prosecute the perpetrators to the full extent of the law. And we will save millions and millions of dollars, because it's not fair to taxpayers, and it's not fair to the people who really need the free health care. I just gave you in 5 minutes 6 suggestions that will save at least $1 billion. And there are a lot more. Look, you know, I hate to paraphrase James Carville, but it's the spending, stupid. We don't have a revenue problem nearly as much as we have a spending problem, and this much I know. We cannot tax, and we cannot spend, and we cannot regulate ourselves into prosperity. And anybody who believes otherwise obviously failed history class. It has been an honor to be here today. It's the spending, it's not the revenue. Our revenues are up from $16.5 billion 10 years ago to $25 billion today. It's a 40% increase. Our economy's only grown 25%. We're having budget deficits for one reason only, because the legislature keeps spending more money than they take in. And I don't care how high they raise revenue, as long as they keep spending money more than they take in, we're going to run budget deficits. Governor Edwards says the problem can be solved by implementing the largest tax increase in the history of the state. It's breathtaking. He wants to raise personal income taxes, sales taxes, corporate income taxes, corporate franchise taxes, utility taxes, inventory taxes, cigarette taxes, liquor taxes. I could keep going. It's not going to solve the problem, and it's going to tank this economy. What I hope Governor Edwards ultimately agrees to do is just say, look, for the next 6 months, we're not going to mention the word taxes. We're going to concentrate on one thing and one thing only. How can we lower our costs while still being able to deliver a decent product? I have sent him and the legislators over 400 suggestions of ways we can reduce our spending without hurting anybody. And I hope that he will accept them. Because basically what the governor, this is what he's saying to the people of Louisiana. He is asking Louisiana families and Louisiana businesses to cut their budgets so Louisiana state government doesn't have to cut its budget. And our people can't afford anymore. It's time for Louisiana state government to live within its means. I respectfully disagree with the governor. He believes we're one tax increase away from prosperity. I don't. It's the spending.
Your reaction to the revenue estimating conference estimate?
I'm a little perplexed. They believe that the bottom is going to fall out of our revenues over the next 5 months. They could be right. None of us are clairvoyant. I do know this. I just got in the January revenue numbers, and we improved by 3%. Now, I'm not saying they're wrong. I just don't completely understand how they're coming up with their numbers. The trend to me is a little bit better. Look, I understand politics. You know, when you want to pass a tax increase, you try to scare people to death. Let me look you in the eye and tell the taxpayers of the state, we're not going to close down LSU. We're not going to throw people out of hospitals, okay? We're not going to stop building roads. I've seen this movie. We're going to get this thing worked out. The only issue is whether we work it out by imposing the largest tax increase in the history of Louisiana, which will tank in this economy, or whether we work it out by doing what we should have been doing all the time. It's called living within our means, and I hope it's the latter.
You think this is a scare tactic?
I think a lot of it is, yeah. I'm not saying we don't have a serious budget problem. We do. But it's not like this is the first one we've ever had, okay? It seems like we have a budget problem every year. This one is a little more serious than normal. It's not nearly as bad as it was in 1989. The legislature saw this coming. You didn't have to be clairvoyant to see it coming. For 8 years, every year, we spent more than we took in. And then we hid it with accounting gimmicks. And now the chickens have come home to roost.
And what do you say about every time you mention statutory dedications, Governor Edwards and Commissioner Darden say that's not an option, that's not going to work?
They say it's not an option, but it was an option 3 months ago. I'll show you the articles there. All you got to do is go Google it. You'll see about 20 different articles where both Governor Edwards and then candidate Jay Darden said the first thing they would do would be to eliminate these 156 statutory dedications containing $400 million and make them compete against higher education and other needs for the money. Now, I don't know what happened in 3 months that all of a sudden it went from a bad idea to a good idea. It's not just my idea. Every report you look at talks about it. Blueprint Louisiana talks about it. The Committee of 100 talks about it. The Public Affairs Research Council says it's a good idea. They think it's a bad idea all of a sudden. Look, I do not believe it is right to try to scare the living daylights out of the people of Louisiana so they'll allow their taxes to be raised. I would rather have a rational, reasoned discussion about why we need to do the largest tax increase in the history of the state. I don't think we do. And all this business about we're going to shut down LSU and we're going to have to unplug the kidney dialysis machines and the world's going to spin off its axis. I've heard that so many times, and so have the people of this state. Give me a break. Let's cut the hysterics, let's cut the drama, and let's have a rational discussion about how we can live within our means.
So is it safe to assume tonight your rebuttal is not going to be very favorable towards the governor's speech?
I do not support the governor's plan. I just don't. He hasn't done anything to try to reduce spending. I've sent him over 400 suggestions. I know we can reduce our spending. I see businesses and families do it every day, and I'm not going to support new taxes and still, as long as we're hiring. We just hired a few months ago and we're supposed to be broke. We're paying somebody $1.1 million to build a sculpture for one of our public hospitals. Give me a break.
Have they said anything about those 400 suggestions?
No, I've heard nothing.
If people have questions like more information about some of these matters, what should they do?
Go to our website, latreasury.com, latreasury.com. And let me say this, you know, I have a good relationship with Governor Edwards. We've spoken several times. I really appreciate that. I want to see the governor do well, because if he does well, Louisiana does well. But let me tell you something. If he passes these taxes, you think we're in a recession now? Just wait. It's going to tank this economy. How can we turn to the 10,000 men and women who just were laid off in the oil and gas industry and say, we need you to pay more income tax. We need you to pay more sales tax. We need to be cutting their taxes, not raising them.